It's more draft talk on the Lads Football Network as we inch closer and closer to the 2023 NFL Draft. You can find out all the best analysis, in-depth team. Matter of fact, that's what we're doing here. More team needs, roster analysis, the depth charts, of course, is something that our lads is synonymous with as far as the best in the biz. If you haven't checked out ourlads.com now, you are missing out. So make sure to do that. Not just for the NFL depth charts, but also college football. And of course, the draft guide will be out any day now. So that will be something that you want to get your hands on if you want to know about every important player in this draft. The guide is what you're looking for. You can get a hard copy. You can get a PDF. And speaking of PDFs, we're giving away some PDFs on our final mock draft show. It's a live show on Friday the 21st. Next week, we'll let you know when we're going to ETA. I guess you could say our time to start approximately. We haven't figured that out yet, but it'll be a live mock draft show. We're going to give away PDF versions of the Our Lads draft guide on that show. So check it out. Make sure to subscribe right here. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe. But also, click the like button and share it with your friends. So Dave Syvertsen joining us here, the lead scout at ourlads.com. And Dave, we've already been through so far the AFC and NFC West, the AFC and NFC South. We're going to do the North today, and then we're going to finish up with the East on Monday.
Yeah, we're halfway home. We were two sides of the divisions down, and we got two more to go.
And your rankings. Now, we're going to go over your final offense and defensive rankings next Wednesday and Friday. When will they be posted on the website?
So I'm working with them right now. I'm hoping that it's going to be early next week before we do our show. It's funny, I was on with Jeff Schwartz and Shane Marine last night at Sirius, and they were using the ranks that are on the Our Lads website, saying you guys have Tanner McKee above Hendon Hooker, and I just had to put it out there that those aren't necessarily my rankings. Those are, I guess you could say I'm second in line with who's actually putting the rankings on the website. But those will all be updated, I think, early next week.
Okay, and that same thing, or will those be your rankings?
That's what I'm going to hope for. I mean, I will have a separate post that says Dave Syvertsen's rankings in there. And I'm going to try to push them to put that on the actual homepage. But we'll see.
I know your rankings will be on this channel and on this network next Wednesday and Friday. So
yes, sir. Yes, they will.
If they want to know exactly what the rankings are for Dave Syvertsen, check it out on the Our Lads Football Network next week. All right, so let's start with the NFC North. And we'll start in alphabetical order. Year 2 of the Matt Eberflus era after a very disappointing year 1, but that's, what was going to go on there. They're definitely in rebuild mode, new GM and all that stuff too. So, second year for Ryan Poles and also for Eberflus. And we take a look at what they've done in the offseason at this point as far as the big news, obviously, was moving out of the top spot. It was a really good deal I think for both teams. Chicago made out. Not only do they get the draft capital, but they end up getting a much-needed weapon, DJ Moore, for their young quarterback. So that's real important. They also added Tanyan at tight end. Now, I will have to say, though, the running back situation, I did not like the way they handled it. I don't know what went on behind the scenes last year. We talked about it quite a bit. And they actually let him go. I don't understand how they couldn't have traded David Montgomery in the offseason. I mean, at the trade deadline. How in the world did they not do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible they dropped the ball, right? Maybe they were asking for too much and teams just shut the door on them and then never open the doors back up. There's definitely a story there that is not public yet.
Yeah.
But those things usually have a way of making their way out at some point. But I think no matter what, the backfield is eventually going to belong to Khalil Herbert. I know they had Dante Foreman, who is, actually an ascending player as his career goes on. But I believe that had more to do with opportunity and the situation he's in. I think if Chicago's going to take a leap forward because of backfield production, it's going to be more about Herbert than Foreman regardless. But I agree with you that they dropped the ball last year, and my guess is they were asking for too much, and the team shut the door on them.
Well, speaking of skill positions, as we take a look at the Bears, you know how much I love Herbert, and I thought and I know our lads, and I deservedly so, based on last year, because Foreman was a number one, Herbert was a number two, but it's not going to be long before Khalil Herbert becomes the number one running back on the depth chart, because he's their future. It's not Donta Foreman.
I agree.
And he's just one of those guys too that you love to have, because he look at it. What did he have? Like a 6-yard average last year. 5.7.
He was up there.
That's
inside, outside, great blocker, great teammate. Checks all the boxes.
Yep. All right. So overall, though, we know Fields is going to be there. So you've got your quarterback. You even have now, I guess, your backup quarterback, bringing in PJ Walker. You're fine with that. I mean, you're not going to do nothing next year anyway if Fields goes down. And then at the receiver position, Kmet, he showed some signs, and it's nice that they brought in Tanyan. Don't have to worry about tight end. So wide receiver, the DJ Moore deal, I think, puts him in a position where they also don't have to worry too much about that spot either, because you expect a jump in production, your hope, with Velus Jones Jr., and you throw in the deal last year for Claypool, so I think they're fine there. So without a doubt, on offense, it's about the offensive line and what they need to do to improve that area. And when you take a look overall at the biggest issues along the offensive line, right now at center, that is a big hole. Patrick is considered, as far as the depth chart is concerned, their number one center. He's a below average guy to begin with. He's injury prone. And by the way, they had 8 different line combinations due to injuries last year, and there was only one 17-game starter, and it happened to be a guy that nobody expected to have that kind of season, was Braxton Jones, who had what a find. I mean, that was an awesome find in the 5th round. So they actually are pretty set at tackle, hopefully, with Jenkins and Jones. They added Nate Davis, but that's just a kind of holdover kind of piece. So they got to take care, no question, in my mind. I think you would agree with me, on offense, it has to be the interior of the offensive line.
Yeah, and I do think one of the answers is currently on the roster. All right, Tevin Jenkins, he's only been in the league for 2 years. Year 1, they had him play left tackle, and it was a complete and utter disaster. Yes. They didn't even give him another shot there. They moved him inside, but he was good inside last year.
Okay.
And if you want to move a couple of these pieces around, Cody Whitehair has experience. He came into the league, his first 5 years were at center. Could you put Jenkins back at guard? You'd have to move him again. You'd be putting him on the left side, because I think Nate Davis is entrenched as the right guard. So I like that interior of Jenkins at left guard, Whitehair at center, Davis at right guard, and then you go into the draft, and where they're sitting right now, that might have been their plan, trading down, is you grab your right tackle with that first pick and with your first round pick.
Yeah, who do they have? What's the Bears draft situation right now? Early.
I believe they're sitting at 9. Let me confirm that.
Let's get that.
I believe it's 9 overall.
Because now they have 2 first round picks, or do they get one of the picks next year?
I think it's the next year. I think they have 1 first round pick in this draft. I'm going to confirm that right now.
And in the meanwhile, while you're doing that, just to keep in mind, too, Jenkins did have a neck injury late last season. So anytime you're dealing with the neck, that is taken extra seriously. And so another reason why they have to have a backup plan. And that your idea puts into mix that there is some flexibility. There's some, hey, they could do this, they could do that. So that, I think, is also a good thing. So when they go into the draft, they don't have to be pigeonholed. They might say, hey, you know what, I really like this guard, or I really like this tackle over the guard or over the tackle, and then that could be the decision that the reason they go in that direction. So what's their draft status?
So they're picking at number 9, and then they don't pick again until the 53rd pick, because they don't have their second rounder.
Okay.
Pittsburgh.
Well, that's why they got DJ Moore, I guess. So
they lost pick number 32, the first pick of the second round, in that Chase Claypool trade.
Okay.
So they have 2 picks in the top 53. I mean, I could see that moving down even again, But in my opinion, the decision to move out of one was future assets, but also looking at this defensive side of the ball. Okay, we haven't gotten there yet, but you basically had your choice of Jalen Carter or Will Anderson if you were going to stay at number one.
Yes.
And obviously that would have been the pick, one of those two
Sure.
guys. You move down to 9, you're no longer in striking distance of those two. And you can see by some of the personnel moves they made in free agency, not big time players along the defensive line, but guys that you know can come in and play. Rasheem Green, DeMarcus Walker, Andrew Billings. You know, all these guys were, and then they added 2 linebackers. Like, they solidified the front at least for this upcoming season. So I believe the move down from 1 said, hey, we're going to go in and we might get the first tackle off the board. It's even possible that we'll get the first or second corner off the board too. I do think corner is the number 1 need on this team. If you said you have 8 guys graded equally at number 9 overall, I think that's where they lean. They were 32nd, dead last year in yards per attempt allowed. In that secondary, I mean, you look at the names up there, there's nothing that gets you excited at corner. I think they're strong inside at safety with Brisker and Eddie Jackson, but
yes,
they need a big time guy on the outside. And you know, a lot of this, how they handle the offensive line is what do they view Tevin Jenkins as? Are they comfortable moving Cody Whitehair to center? But
you know what? They could take care of that with drafting the kid from Northwestern.
Yes, Skoronski. Yeah, I mean
that gives them more flexibility.
I mean, then now you just go into camp saying, "Hey, we don't know exactly how we're going to put this chess piece together, but you know, we have the players. We just have to figure out where they go." So, you know, will he be there? I'm not sure. I think Broderick Jones is a good spot for him. The tackle from Georgia, Broderick Jones, the tackle from Georgia.
Really, you think he's going to go in that area? Okay.
I think he's going to go top 15.
Okay.
Skoronski is going to be the first lineman off the board, and I think he's going to be number 2.
What about the kid from Florida?
Oh, Torrance? Yeah, I mean, Osiris Torrance. I have him going to Philly, which is like a pick or 2 after that.
So he's also going to be a top 15 guy?
I think he's going to be a top 15 guy. Basically, a lot of the teams that are meeting with him too and bringing him in for visits, they're all kind of like in that, you know, Washington and Green Bay, mid-teens.
Okay.
He's going to be a top 15 pick.
All right. So, but the other thing too is they desperately need edge rush help.
Yes.
So here's the question. Because we know that there's a big gap, and I think this is why I think the Bears, I think you even mentioned it, I think the Bears might be in a better spot in any team that is looking for a cornerback or an edge rusher, and they have a high enough draft pick, might be better off being the trade partner. Let me move down. Because once you get by that 1 or maybe even 2, to tell you the truth, the more I hear you, and the more we look at this, I'm starting to think there's a gap now after Gonzalez. To tell you the truth,
there is,
and I just wouldn't because there's so many other corners that are sitting there that can go between like 20 and 40. Well, why would I reach? Why don't I just move back if I can? And same thing at edge rusher. Once you get past Anderson, there's no like immediate number 2. You can. I've heard all this guy, and how about that guy? Really in the top 10? No, I mean, why reach for a guy like that? And I'm talking about the kid from Texas Tech or the kid from Iowa. No, I mean, I'm not picking a guy like that in the top 10, not me personally. So, maybe the Bears would be in that situation. They trade back. But so the question I guess I'm going to ask you then is if they don't trade back, who are they looking at either cornerback or edge rusher with their first pick?
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to ignore the offensive line, they're going to go defense with that first pick. I think it's going to be more towards corner. Devin Weatherspoon is a name that keeps on reappearing. He solidified his status as a top 15 caliber guy overall at his pro day a couple days ago. He did run in the low 4.4s.
That's not
the
bad.
One question. Yeah, that's the one question with him is he gets very grabby downfield, and he's gotten beaten vertical multiple times by the NFL caliber receivers that he matched up against. So if Gonzalez is off the board, and I think he will be by then, I think it goes Weatherspoon before edge rusher.
And that's another local kid.
Yep.
So that could be interesting. Who do you believe it is? I don't think there's a consensus at all, though, who the number 2 edge rusher is there?
No, there's not a consensus. If there's a majority, I would say it's Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. My personal will be Miles Murphy from Clemson.
Yeah, I'd rather go that route myself than.
He's a more natural pass rusher. I think he plays with a hotter engine than Wilson. And Wilson, a lot of his production came inside shoulder of the tackle, which is not a bad thing. But I think he didn't match up against NFL caliber talent the way Miles Murphy did.
And by the way, and we talked about this before too, is that whether you agree with it or not, especially if you have the same coaching staff there with the same systems and all that, like Clemson has, you do get a stigma sometimes attached to a program when whether it's good or not, and not is really the reason I'm bringing this up, is because if you look at it, there have been a lot of disappointing Clemson players on both sides of the offensive and defensive lines.
Yep.
I think in general, I'd say 75% of those guys are misses.
Yep.
And I think that could weigh on the minds of these scouts and these GMs. So wait a second. Yeah, I know, but look at this guy. Look at that guy. I mean, there's got to be a reason that a lot of these guys look like, because they're usually 5-star kids. They come there. They're a part of this big group, sort of like Georgia in a way, but more, again, I'm just talking about the system and the depth. But when you ask them to step up and be the man, they can't be the man.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, you're not lying about that. And it's been a front that's been formidable at the college level for a long time. But, Cleveland Farrell or Tavis Bryant that came out of Clemson a couple of years ago. I would say the one lineman that has really stepped up and performed at a high level is Christian Wilkins, the D tackle. That's with the Dolphins right now, and so it's tough. That's always a tough situation in my head too. Like, does the school/program bias can that really take over an individual player's grade? If you step away and remove yourself from any emotion of the moment of being right or wrong about a guy, they shouldn't impact each other unless their production was incredibly scheme-based or role-based. There are certain roles in college that really engineer a lot of production. But with the defensive line, that really is not the case, especially with these guys. So I try to separate them as much as you can. But, I'm human, and it's, you could say that we're scarred, some PTSD from a guy that doesn't work out, Cleveland Farrell being one of them, I try to remove myself from that history as much as I can.
All right, now let's turn our attention to the Detroit Lions, and we're starting first on defense. And on defense, I look up front at the pass rush situation. They hit the home run last year with Hutchinson, but Hutchinson's a guy that you can kind of use anywhere. And James Houston was just an incredible. I don't even know how to compare what he did last year with the limited amount of snaps he had. The fact that he's not big, so it's about pure speed and athleticism. And for him to have the amount of sacks and production he had, you just can't count on that again. You can just hope. But my meaning here is I think they still need some more edge rush help. I think that's going to be important. And maybe even more important, I think they also, because they can't count on Awuzurike, that I think ship might have even sailed. I mean, we're not even sure if he's ever going to play again. So and Paschal is a nice player, but he's a rotational type guy. McNeil did a really good job. Kaminsky's a nice leader, but they could definitely use like another guy up front. But if I'm looking at that front seven, first of all, that's what we're going to start off with. Edge rusher might be the way to go as well.
Yeah, defensive line, I agree with you up front. Just looking at the depth chart right now, I do think John Kaminsky gets a little bit of a bad rap. I mean, as a pass rusher, too, we know he's a premier run defender on the outside. He sets the edge very well, but he only had 10 less pressures than Hutchinson last year, despite 200 fewer pass rush opportunities. So he was on the field a lot less than Aiden was in pass rush situations, and he almost applied as much pressure as Hutchinson did. And then you throw in, like you said, Paschal, Charles Harris, even, again, not guys that you're going to make draft decisions on, but maybe at the top of the draft, if you have equal grades, inside, outside guys, I'm leaning inside first because I don't want Aleem McNeil to be my premier inside rusher. He can do it because he's powerful, bull rusher. We've seen some D tackles evolve that started off as run defenders and they got so good at bull rushing that they developed a pass rush repertoire. But a guy that big, that body type, I don't want him on the field that often. I want him seeing 50 to 60% of the snaps, and the opportunity to bring him off the field would be short passing situations. But you look at this roster, I mean, who are you bringing on the field in place of him? So I think you're going to end up overplaying this guy. And like you said, I'm not going to rely on Levi coming back. And if he does, it's icing on the cake.
Yes.
So if there's one need that I see the most on this team overall, it's on that defensive line and specifically a D tackle. Now, like you said, the advantage they have with Kaminsky and Hutchinson is they can shift inside. So you don't, if you are really only looking for a pass rusher to add to the interior, you can go get your edge rusher and move one or both of these guys inside, problem solved, right? But if there is something that lines up schematically and personnel, I think D tackle would be the smart way to go. The kid from Northwestern just keeps popping my head. I was asked last night, who's going to be the surprise top 10 pick? Right? And I think it's the kid from Northwestern, if I had to pick one.
Okay.
And this is the team I could see it happening
So
on.
he fits that model, too, of Dan Campbell and what he's looking for?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. I mean, this is, if you guys don't believe me, go check it out yourself. He is Aaron Donald reincarnated physically. I'm not saying he's going to be one of the best pass rushers of all time. Just the measurements, the speed. This kid, he's got better length and better speed. And Aaron Donald is slowly changing the game a little bit. I think a lot of teams are going to start looking for this 280 to 290 pound three tech that can just outmove everybody and disrupt the passing and rushing game respectively.
By the way, do you think that's because of the fact that so many teams are going to more of a zone approach? And so having a speedier guy in the middle is now something where you can use that guy to your advantage instead of just going mano a mano.
Right, because he beats guys to a spot.
Yes.
It's exactly it. I mean, no matter what, you're not going to find an offensive lineman that is as athletic as Aaron Donald, and you're not going to find an offensive lineman as athletic as the kid from Northwestern. So it's just keep an eye on that spot. Every now and then I want to throw a little bit of a risk out there instead of just going with the norm. That's kind of boring, and I think that kid is a potential surprise top 10 pick to Detroit.
All right. Well, at corner, if everything goes well in the backfield, if everything goes well, you know what? The depth is much better this year, no question. Even if they just went into the season with what they have, it should be better. The problem is, you're at that point now with Jeff Okudah where it's like, this is it. You got to show me or not. And they have not had the Jeff Okudah that they thought they were getting when they first picked him so far. Throw in the fact that even though Mosley is a nice pickup, just a guy. That's all he is. He's nothing special. The Cam Sutton deal was an excellent pickup at nickel. You get Walker hopefully healthy, but by picking up Gardner Johnson and the fact that Kirby Joseph was such a nice pickup last year, depending on, now they use a lot of three safeties, so that's why it's important that Walker does come back to being the guy and the leader that he is for that secondary. But again, I'm using a little bit of ifs and hopes and stuff, which is why a number one corner is still potentially needed here, because I just doubt that all of a sudden Jeff Okudah is going to be the man. If he comes back and he plays and he can stay healthy, maybe he'll have a nice career in the NFL. I don't think he's ever going to live up to his draft status. So I think, but like we talked about, I don't necessarily think Detroit has to use that pick first. I think they can definitely, with all the depth we talked about, I think they could go ahead and grab one of those guys later if they wanted to.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I even think that Detroit's in a position, especially with another first-round pick just a few after, right, that if the quarterback market gets a little wacky at the top of this draft and someone ends up dropping, that's a spot where someone might want to trade up to. You might have a few teams competing for that spot. It's hard to, we're hearing rumors now that Bryce Young is going to be Carolina's guy. Houston might skip quarterback at number 2 because they don't love C.J. Stroud. If that starts to happen, that Houston might not love C.J. Stroud enough to pick him number 2. If Bryce Young goes number 1 to Carolina. Okay. Yep, and that's actually, I brought him up last time or 2 times ago that we talked, Lance Zierlein. He was the one that said, he was the first one, and then Mortensen said this yesterday, that Carolina is leaning Bryce Young and Houston is not Gaga over CJ Stroud.
So now all of a sudden Carolina is leaning towards Bryce Young.
Yep. I mean, this time of year, what do they always tell us, right? Don't believe anything here. So we'll see.
But yeah,
we'll
see. At the end, I don't believe it. No.
So if that does happen, that's why I'm just creating a scenario that if there's a quarterback situation where we see a couple guys fall, that number 5 spot might be ideal to trade down from.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And then on offense, look, keep saying it, but this team needs a number 1 tight end. And this draft has so many tight ends. They cannot ignore that position early. They have to grab one of these guys. Now, look, a lot is going to depend on not just the tight end position, but especially the future quarterback position. On what does this organization? What are they thinking about Ben Johnson's career? Like, do they feel like if they're looking around the landscape at the 32 teams in the NFL and say, all right, who could be fired next year? Could Ben Johnson leave us next year? Or do we have 2 more years with Ben Johnson? Because I think everybody knows by now that, especially if this team goes to the playoffs next year, which I think is going to happen, and I think you would agree, that he's, without question, he's going to be the top candidate for a head coaching job. Now, whether he finds the right spot and leaves, the reason I bring this up is because you're going to be drafting or thinking about drafting a quarterback. And I know there's some people who are saying, hey, Detroit should think about drafting Anthony Richardson. Stash a guy like Richardson. He needs to develop, you could develop him for a year and a half or something like that. But what if Johnson's not around? That's a big question. Because you're going to ask Johnson's advice, but what if Johnson just, all right, I'm a head coach somewhere in 2024, and you got his advice, and he liked him, but now he's not there to coach him. So that's a tricky situation, which I think might be a reason why Detroit will not go high for a quarterback, and why this is a good position for one of those second-tier quarterbacks. If you want to throw in Hendon Hooker, that's fine. Guys like that, where you're not swinging too early for the fences, but you bring in a guy anyway just to see whether or not he is someone that could eventually take over for Jared Goff. If Jared Goff does not, because not like Goff is old, but if Goff just turns out to be a guy that, you know what, he took a step up last year, that was nice, but he ain't going further than that. And now we're getting into the big games and playoff games, and he's failing us, and we know what we have here. Now we have to go higher than that. So those are 2 positions, because again, I bring up tight end because I don't know what Ben Johnson, how he values that tight end position in his offense enough. So if he does, then I don't think there's any question you're going to see a tight end picked up in the 1st or 2nd round.
Yeah, tight end's the top offensive need on this team. I don't think it's debatable at this point, especially with some of the other moves that they've made, and also the return of Jameson Williams, who got his feet wet last year. But now that you have a full offseason of not rehabbing an injury, they're set at receiver. Everyone could always use more depth there. Are you really sold on Josh Reynolds being a guy? Probably not, but
they brought back Marvin Jones, huh?
Marvin Jones is back.
Okay, so that should solidify the depth now for the receivers.
Yeah, there's enough depth there to ignore it. And so you still always have to find ways to improve the passing game. All right, you're not going to touch quarterback like you said. I think the reason you have behind it is brilliant. You're probably not going to have your OC next year, so I say put it on hold. If you want to use a day 3 pick on a backup to compete with Nate Sudfeld, fine. See if you find lightning in a bottle there. But, the tight end position, the idea that Ben Johnson does not value it, I don't believe it.
I would agree too. Yeah.
I think it has more to do with economics, that they didn't want to pay Hawkinson what they felt that they can pay a group of guys what they were paying Hawkinson and get similar production. But to say that they're not going to even look at one of these premier tight ends in the 1st round simply because they traded away Hawkinson, I just don't see it. And I think they're one of the favorites to pick the 1st tight end.
And because right now, where are they at 18?
They are, I think they're earlier than that.
Are they?
They are 18, yes. 18.
Okay, so they're 6 and 18. So at 6, see, the thing is with 6, they could definitely go with Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Because he'll be there.
Yes.
He'll be there. So that could be the first cornerback taken off, Gonzalez at 6. Oh, by the way, what if Jalen Carter's available?
Yeah. That would be a gift. Now, does he fit the Dan Campbell ethos? with the
Good point.
character. That's a tough sell to me, especially a guy that looked like a slob at his pro
Good
day.
point.
There are certain coaches that they put a lot of value
As well you
into
should.
working out and putting your best foot forward in interviews like that. So, I mean, on paper, it'd be a great decision and it would be a great fit as well. But, personality-wise, I don't see the fit.
And when I was saying first-round tight end, I wasn't saying 6, so Detroit fans don't be going crazy, because I completely would understand why you would want to jump off the ship if you thought that Detroit would be picking a tight end at 6. But 18 is the perfect spot to pick a tight end. Is there a particular tight end that you think fits best for any reason? Or let's just say it's the first tight end off the board. Who do you think it's going to be?
Oh, I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, the one issue I see with the top 2 pass catchers on Detroit is they both had above average drop rates. And if I'm a tight end, if I'm drafting a tight end number 18, I don't need him to be a premier blocker, but I do want him to be a yard after catch guy, and I want him to have the best hands available among all the tight ends. And that's Dalton Kincaid.
And that's a Dan Campbell guy.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what. I think all 3 of these guys at the top. Darnell Washington, not completely sure about yet, but Musgrave, Meyer, and Kincaid, they're all Dan Campbell type guys. But in terms of skill set and what Detroit already has at tight end, Kincaid fits the bill.
Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. And we're still, unfortunately, on hold for Aaron Rodgers. And I mentioned this yesterday on the show about the silly new rumor about being traded to San Francisco. It ain't happening. So get over it. He's going to the Jets. There ain't no 2 ways about it. And it just depends on when. And it's going to happen before this draft. I mean, Green Bay can't be that stupid. So this is just hardball. They're going to wait as long as they possibly could. And maybe it'll be on draft day. But they're gonna milk this as long as they can. And here's the thing, though. When he gets traded, would it be better for Green Bay? And I think so, that they just add one of these veterans in free agency. They probably do it like the very next day or the next week. Once Aaron Rodgers is out of the building, then you bring in a veteran to back up Jordan Love. No reason to go draft another young quarterback in the middle rounds. That's useless. But other than that, when you're taking a look at what the Packers are in need of, and let's keep in mind that they've lost Lazard, Cobb is still a free agent, and then throw in Tanyan's gone. So those are some receivers that are not there offensively as we start with the offense. I actually think the offensive line is okay. I think it's pretty set. I don't think there's any major holes. Could they get better here or there? Could they find a young replacement for Bakhtiari? Sure. So there are some things they could do, but no glaring needs. But they definitely need a number 1 tight end, unless they believe DeGuara could be that guy. I don't, but maybe they do. I doubt it. This is, as we said, great tight end draft, so maybe they get a tight end at some point. They have very good young receivers. I really like the youth and the talent. All last year. With Watson, Dubs, and Watson we know about. But even Teray and Melton are a couple of guys to keep an eye on. So I think they definitely go after another receiver in the draft, and they probably should go after a veteran receiver at some point. They need a veteran on this unit. But other than that, offensively, maybe you keep an eye on A.J. Dillon's contract for next season. And maybe get ahead of the game by adding another running back to the mix. If I'm looking at offensively for the Green Bay Packers, I'm probably saying the number 1 need, tight end.
Yeah, that's the number 1 need on the team. Robert Tonyan, he flashed in 2021. You thought he was going to be the next big thing. You thought he was going to be him and Rodgers had that connection. He tore his ACL. Just did not come back the way that a lot of them were hoping. The ageless Mercedes Lewis is a free agent. They loved him, but at some point, the guy's going to have to hang him up. He was essentially a blocker only that would every now and then get a red zone target. They're going to rely on DeGuara and Tyler Davis to carry this position. I think those guys can be a great secondary option.
2 and 3.
I think they need They need a wide tight end. They need a guy that can put his hand in the dirt. DeGuara can't block. Tyler Davis has 8 career catches. So let them be the backup.
So would Washington be a really good fit here then?
Darnell Washington, I think, if there is a comparison, which he's a very hard guy to create a comparison for, it is Mercedes Lewis. And they loved what he brought to the table as a blocker. And I think Darnell Washington, I mean, he is the caliber of a blocker of an offensive lineman.
Yes.
You know, I would make the argument that he's a better run blocker than some of the tackles in this draft. And so I think this is as high as I could see him going. This would be, to some, would be considered a reach. And it might be.
You know what? In this draft, I think once you get past like the first 4 or 5 players, I don't think anybody's a reach.
Yeah, a lot of these guys should be grouped together. And, you know, you answer this for me. Is this, if they took a Darnell Washington at this point in the draft, is that really drafting for need rather than value? Because there's a good shot there will be some better players available.
Yeah, I could see that. And when we take a look at defense, this is where you could definitely see them going first. I don't really know if they believe in TJ Slayton as the long-term answer at nose tackle. Devontae Wyatt was a nice pickup last year, so I think he's just going to keep getting better. So I think they're in good shape with Clark and Wyatt, but they need at least another really significant upgrade up front. And then you take a look at the secondary. This is definitely a concern. Stokes has not worked out. Nickelback, you know, that is now a complete need, no question about it. No way is Nixon who's penciled in right now. He's not going to be the guy, and I doubt they're going to rely on the 5th-round draft pick either from last year. They signed Tavares Moore from San Francisco at safety, but he's not going to be the guy unless there's something about him that they like that they feel like San Francisco wasn't getting the best of. So I could look at nickelback. I could look at outside corner. They still haven't re-signed Amos, so I could look at a safety. So I think on defense, that's where I would go. I would go, who's the best defensive back? And maybe it's the kid from Alabama, because he could play a variety of positions. Because at nose tackle, you could always draft one of those guys later.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't even think there's an interior defensive lineman that even comes close to meeting the grade at this point in the draft. So no matter what, I do think they lost a few bodies this year off that defensive line, and Dean Lowry, Jerron Reed, and, you know, just adding a couple pieces at some point in the draft will be necessary. But there's no one that meets that first round grade. And Brian Branch is, I mean, everything that you were saying that the Packers might need in the secondary, he can fill all those spots. And, you know, his best role would probably be nickel or safety at the next level. But even Darnell Savage, you're not sure about him anymore either. I mean,
good point.
The secondary is just loaded with question marks. And, you know, instead of trying to find the perfect fit for which position you want the most, you might just want to bring in the best football player. Similar to what the Dolphins did way back with Minka Fitzpatrick. You know, you bring him in and from the same program, actually a similar role as well, and say, hey, let's try him out at a few different spots. We will eventually find, and we'll build around him a little bit, and we'll find the perfect spot for him, or he's so good that you can fill the other spots in after you get him, and he can move around year to year.
I know mock drafts, by the way, I was just checking those out, and we did have them taking corners in both of them, and that's because Branch was not available in either of the mock drafts that I can see. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be corner or tight end. I believe when it comes to the value of who's going to be there at that point and what this team is really looking for right now, it's going to be one of those two spots with their first pick.
All right. Next up, the Minnesota Vikings. And there have been some changes over the last year or so. Of course, you know, the general manager and the head coach and so forth. So they got a whole, you know, they actually had like a bonus season. They had all those big close wins last year, and they were able to kind of find a way into postseason, even though a lot of people felt like what happened would happen, that they would be knocked out pretty quickly, and they were. But again, I thought it was a very good learning experience for the young coaching staff and the young general manager. And now it's about taking that step up this year and start to really take advantage of that experience. You still have a veteran quarterback in Kirk Cousins, so this is a team that no one would be surprised at because now we're getting later in Kirk Cousins' contract and his career, that sooner or later you're going to have to look for either the immediate replacement or sort of like the Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers kind of replacement, where you bring him in for a couple of years and then Cousins just departs, and then you could bring in your quarterback. And I think this is the year we could start seeing that happen. I was intrigued by the signing, the signing of Josh Oliver from Baltimore. What do you think about Oliver? Because he had a really he seemed like a really good he has good blocking skills. Hawkinson we know is a good receiver. Feels like they solidified their tight end position with that one move. Did you like Oliver come out of college?
I did, and it's funny. I talked to the tight ends coach there when he was coming out, and they said it's going to be a 2-year, 3-year project for him, but he's going to be a starting caliber tight end, and it's exactly what happened. And I even think he was hidden behind Mark Andrews a little bit at Baltimore, just didn't get the amount of consistent looks that he truly deserved. And I'm not saying he did deserve to get them in front of in front of Mark Andrews.
And
But
they
now
had
that
four.
he's
They had four tight ends, including him.
yeah, yeah, and then Isaiah Likely comes out of nowhere last year and gives him that slot tight end. So I'm not saying he's coming into a situation where he is the starter, but I do think this team is going to use him at a high level, especially because they are down a receiver. They lost Thielen, and I know they like KJ Osborne and Jalen Naylor's coming. Going to be entering his second year, but I think you're going to see a lot of 12 personnel out of this team with 2 tight ends on the field.
Smart,
and he'll be a big part of that.
Yes, but they have to replace Thielen some way, somehow.
Yeah, and they will.
Yeah, how dangerous this offense could be if they actually used their first-round pick on a receiver. I don't think that's the way they should go because they have some serious defensive back questions we'll get into in just a second. But if they decided, hey, look at all this, all these other players and positions taken ahead, and the receivers just keep dropping and dropping and dropping, maybe it'd be tempting to take a guy like that. And what I'm talking about is I don't know. It could be Jigba, it could be Johnson. Who do you think could end up as the number 1 receiver?
I think Smith-Njigba is going to be the first receiver taken, but I think he's going to be long gone by the time Minnesota's on the board. The second receiver taken is probably the best question in regard to Minnesota. And I think it's a tie right now between Quentin Johnson and Zay Flowers. I think and they're completely different players too. So it's really going to be based on, are you looking for more quickness and separation, Zay Flowers? If you're looking for more size, vertical speed.
What do you think Minnesota would be looking for?
It's funny. They took Justin Jefferson, number 22 overall, and now here they are sitting at number 23 overall. They're seeing other receivers being taken in front of them. I think in terms of the fit, if they're looking for, I think they're more of a separation type offense, meaning they want quicker yard after catch types, and that's going to be Zay Flowers from Boston College.
All right. Yeah. All right. So on offense, because you take a look, Madison's back. You look at the offensive line, and you might initially go, especially last year, we got a lot of things to worry about here. But Bradbury played well, which was a big relief. Darasaw, we know he can play. O'Neal is still doing a solid job at tackle. They don't have any issues on the outside. Now they're set at center again. It's about guard, and they drafted Ingram and played him, so you think they're going to do that again. I love the fact they got Chris Reed as an insurance policy. The biggest question of all is the other guard spot. I don't know if they can count, even though he was a second-round draft pick. That was a different GM. That was now going to be 3 years ago. So and we don't really know about Ed Ingram too. So I could definitely see at some point early in the draft the number 1 need outside of potentially going for a wide receiver being a guard.
Yeah, offensively, absolutely.
Yes.
Offensively, the Ezra Cleveland has been very up and down. He was a left tackle at Boise State. You gave him a pass by moving inside in that first year. I think he got rushed into action, if I remember correctly, with injuries popping up in front of him. So he got beat up a little bit. You saw some progress in 2021, and last year he kind of took another step back. So I think at this point he kind of just is what he is, and you're going to have to probably think about a long-term future option at left guard that, maybe not a year 1 starter, but I think there are going to be options there. I think you could find another Ezra Cleveland in this draft, meaning a tackle that you're going to want to move inside after a year or 2.
And by the way, what do you think about the possibility of them using not necessarily their first pick, but using another pick? Could be the second pick on a quarterback.
I mean, I'll tell you what. You asked me to put money on where does Hendon Hooker go in the draft. It's to Minnesota at 23 overall with that first pick.
Yeah.
I mean, Cousins is a free agent next year. He's not signed past 2023, and he's 35 years old. And I think you kind of already know what you're getting out of Kirk Cousins as your starting quarterback. You're just not going to get over that hump. He'll get you to the playoffs. he will not get you through the playoffs.
I like it. So that's another look. They're going to have some options, especially because when we talk about the defense, their biggest need being corner, because you've got the Booth, who's always injured, which is the reason he ended up as a second-round pick, and he got injured again last year. Seen got injured as their first-round safety last year, but he's a safety, and they're set. They're okay at safety. But with Booth, with the injury history, you're relying now on a fourth-rounder from last year who didn't play a whole lot. You're hoping he could definitely be a starter, but even at that point, there's just too many question marks with the two other cornerback spots on the outside after they went after Byron Murphy, which was a much-needed signing from Arizona. But even though they brought in Murphy, and even though they spent 2 early-round draft picks at corner, they need to do it again. They have to.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, this organization, different regimes, but this organization has been putting a lot of resources into corner, and they just can't figure it out in the draft. I mean, they just can't get one right. And this past year, they lose their 2 best corners in free agency. Patrick Peterson and Duke Shelley are both out of town, and I like the Byron Murphy signing as a nickel, but you can't rely on Booth, just like the Titans can't rely on Farley right now until he plays a full season of injury-free football. But Caleb Evans, I did like him coming out of Missouri. I'd like to see him in year 2, but if year 1 is the indicator as to what he's going to be in the NFL, it's not good enough to be a starting corner. It's good enough to be a number 3 or number 4. So this team could use 2 picks in the defensive backfield, and they could be early as well.
And by the way, what do you think about the kid they drafted when you look up front? The kid they drafted in the 5th round, because they signed Lowry from Green Bay, but Lowry and Phillips, they're just kind of okay. They're nice veteran, players that can do okay for you. And actually, there's 2 questions. One is about the 5th round draft pick, and the other was the blossoming of the kid Tonga, who played a very solid, nose for this team last year. So how surprised were you about that? And what about last year's 5th round pick?
I mean, nose tackles are like relief pitchers to me, right? Like, you just can't get surprised. Like, sometimes it really is a scheme or surrounding a coach that really just gets them over the hump. And that's why, it's another reason why you don't put a lot of resources into a 3-4 nose tackle unless he's special, right? And, it looks like he's found a home here. I like this defensive front, both the starting lineup and the depth. I don't think it needs to be touched in the draft. Right. Like, I think they can look in even the edge guys
so
too.
So what do you like about the kid from last year?
Otto
Mayo. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah. So he is 5th round pick from last year. He's an every down player. Okay. Right. He can play inside. He can play outside. I think he's the best edge setting 3-4 defensive end they have on this team. But it does not come at the expense of being able to rush the passer. He's got rush moves. He's not just a bull rusher. Does not have enough speed to rush the edge, but that's not why he's there. He can run. He can man 2 gaps. I mean, this kid's going to be in the league for a long time.
Like it.
And you're not going to hear his name often, but he's a good player.
Okay, so there you go. And again, because Bullard's another guy that adds depth to the unit, so it looks like they're in pretty good shape up front. All right, so as we move on, we're pretty much in agreement on defense. Cornerback is their their number 1 overall need on the team, and then offensively, will they go quarterback? Is this the draft to do it? Probably. At what point? Could be 1st round, and then take a look at that offensive interior at guard, and also don't be surprised if they swing for the fences and add another wide receiver early. So.
Yep. Options are all on the table for the offense.
That will do it for the NFC North. Now let's talk about the AFC North. And we start with the Baltimore Ravens. And unfortunately, it's sort of like the Jets and the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. We're like in a holding pattern with Lamar Jackson. Nobody really knows what's going to go on here. And, his destinations are kind of dwindling as well. I mean, where's he going to go? Where does he want to go? What's a good fit? Will he stay at Baltimore? There's just a lot of questions, because I think the one thing that it seems like everybody, and I understand why, everybody's, all right, Lamar Jackson, where could he go? What's the fit? What about his contract? But hey, Is anybody talking about who's going to be the quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens?
Yeah, you forget about it.
What happens if he
Real quick.
goes? Well, what are they going to do? So if he does go, and I got to tell you, I would be surprised if he's the quarterback of the Ravens this year. When you're at this point, you got to go. I mean, unless all of a sudden, I seen the light and I signed that deal that you offered me, and I'm going to be here for the next. But that's kind of low. So if that is the fact, and Baltimore goes after a quarterback, I mean, what do you think they'll do? Do you think they'll go for a quarterback in the draft, or do you think they would go for a holdover and then look for a quarterback next year?
I think they'll sign someone. There are enough names out there that can play football. You're not going to win because of them, but I think there's enough guys that can play quarterback, and you'll let them compete with Tyler Huntley for the starting job.
Do you have a couple of names?
Yeah, I mean, I think my top name for that situation would probably be, I mean, this is going to make eyes roll, but I think Carson Wentz, Teddy Bridgewater, guys that just, do you want someone that can a little bit more volatile like Carson Wentz, where there is some good football in him, there is a good arm, but Teddy Bridgewater, you feel safer with him. But no matter what, I think those are the guys that you bring in to back up Tyler.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing, though, and I think this is important. Is we have a new offensive coordinator, and they're not going to run the offense last year that suited Tyler Huntley.
Right.
So I think that if Lamar Jackson is gone and they do run Todd Monken's offense, which they're going to, Tyler Huntley's got to go somewhere else. He's got to go somewhere where he can fit into that type of offense. That maybe he follows Lamar Jackson wherever he is. And I just bring that up because I think if he's competing for a regular pro-style type of quarterback spot, he has no chance.
Right.
Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, that's a good thought. And who do you think is the best Todd Monken quarterback out there? I mean, tools-wise, it's probably Carson Wentz.
Could be, especially because he's younger than Bridgewater. So and if they think that something happened to Wentz at the end of the 21 season, and then pretty much most of last season, and they can kind of get him back to where he was, because he was even respectable the first half of the 21 season. Something happened. So if Monken believes he could fix that temporarily, then, because this is still, at least this year, you would think, it's still going to be more of a running team and a tight end first passing team. So it's not going to be an overnight kind of switch. But taking a look at what Baltimore will probably be looking at, because they have a pick later in the first round, so it's not really early. Besides quarterback, they got to replace Bowers. So we just talked about a Cleveland Ezra. So, unfortunately, Ben is another Cleveland that might need to be, I don't know how happy they'd be with Ben Cleveland starting at left guard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised. He was one of the surprises to me in 2021 where they took him. I had him as a late day 3 pick because of just how stiff he is as a mover. And the Ravens have made a lot of picks like this, right? I mean, the tackle they have, the Fiale from Minnesota, Orlando Brown, some of the previous guys, David Sharp from Florida back in the day, they draft size and strength and power. And that is what Ben Cleveland brings to the table. He makes grown men look small in the NFL. He's a massive body, but to say that there's no backup option behind him right now is, I mean, you're playing with fire. I know Patrick McCarry could play there. John Simpson could play there. But, you need more depth on that line, even if Ben Cleveland works out. But, you got to admit that if the team is going to be reliant on a second-tier, third-tier quarterback and a running game, they need to be much better than where they are right now at left guard.
And I think they might be another team to trade down early, even if it's just a couple of spots, because they don't have a second-round draft pick. So they would be only looking at a late first, and then they don't draft again into the third. So that could be tricky, especially if you are looking to upgrade at guard. Not that you can't also do that through free agency as a kind of Band-Aid deal. But also at offense, we have to keep in mind the wide receiver position. They get Bateman back, hopefully. They brought in Aguilar. He's just a Band-Aid as well. So they don't have good depth either. They're still looking for at least one more impact wide receiver. And I think Tony Lombardi, who covers the Ravens on this network, was the one that brought this up. That, hey, Todd Monken's the offensive coordinator. What about a trade for Mike Evans?
Okay.
You know,
I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. Tampa Bay could unload him.
Tampa Bay is. We talked about Tampa Bay yesterday. You know, they're looking for a whole lot of pieces, especially on the offensive line. So they need some additional, maybe draft capital.
Not a bad move. I mean, what do you give up for him?
That's a good question. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't know whether, because you can't give up. You're not giving up a first round pick this year. I don't.
Right.
You know, Evans has been an incredible, durable. He is. I don't know if people realize that this guy has never had a season less than 1,000 yards.
Almost unheard
Yes.
of. First ballot Hall. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and he doesn't get enough publicity.
No, he does not. So that's the reason. So, but I will say this: if he's, I don't know how many years he has left, but if they feel he's got 4 or 5 more years left, 3 at prime level, maybe you do have to give up a first round draft pick, because you talked about giving up potentially a late first rounder for Hopkins. Heck, I'd rather have Evans.
Yeah,
just as much as Hopkins. So I'm putting them on the same level at this stage of their career. So maybe that is possible. But anyway, I just figured I'd throw that in there because they need a receiver. But on defense, you know what? I think it's pretty much an open. I think there's just some possibilities. I mean, I think they can upgrade a little bit on the defensive line because they don't have a true number 1 guy. You know, they don't have that, man. They don't have the man up front. They can maybe use another edge depth guy. And they do have to replace a couple of their corners, which might be their number 1 need overall. You can't have enough corners. And right now, I think once you get past Marlon Humphrey, there's a lot more kind of question marks than anything else.
Yeah, you're going to have a competition between Jalen Armour-Davis, I think it was a 4th rounder from last year, and Brandon Stevens. We've seen him play for 2 years. He's not good. He's not bad. Like, he just, to quote you, he's just another guy. 6 penalties in a part-time role last year. To do that in your second year in the league, that's a red flag to me. No pun intended. But Armour-Davis is a guy that I had a day 2 grade on him last year. I thought they had a good value there. Got his feet wet, but he was on the field for 32 coverage snaps last year. So you just don't know yet. You don't have enough tape on him to really evaluate. So throwing him out there or him being your plan A or even your plan B is a tremendous risk. And this is a team that has pumped a lot of resources. They understand the value of a corner.
Yes.
And, if you ask me, if one of these top 4 or 5 corners, if they slip to that number 23 spot, I think that's where the direction they're going to go.
There you go. And I loved, the trade to acquire Roquan Smith was genius. I know it wasn't going to happen for my team, but I was just, I knew he was on the block, and I was praying that the Jets would make a move to get him, but they got Mosley, and they're not moving on from him. But what a great deal that was for Baltimore.
Yeah, they're strong. They're pretty strong up front. I'm a big Justin Matabuke fan. I think that he is going to be the dude this year. I think you're going to see him.
So he'll break out. I think he could be the man.
He started to break out already. I think he's going to be the big guy up there. And I love Travis Jones.
Yes, Travis Jones. Yes.
The front, I feel pretty good about. Could they use more depth? Everyone could, but you get David Ojabo back this year, coming back from his Achilles. You never want to forget about that. So, but the back end is shaky, and it's a surprising situation that they're so shaky back there because they've always valued the secondary highly. So that's probably, if they're going to ignore offense in round 1, I believe that's where they go with that first pick.
Yeah. Good reminder too about Ojabo, because look, Owe has not developed yet, and so if you haven't yet seen these guys develop, either one of them, and you're relying on Tyus Bowser to be your veteran number 1 edge rusher at this point, let's remember the Baltimore Ravens, the great defenses they had, a lot of it had to do with they had those edge rushers. They had those guys that can just control your line of scrimmage, create chaos, and there was a combination of things because they always had that really good interior linebacker as well. They had that that incredibly strong up front unit, and then of course they would have someone like Ed Reed in the secondary. But I think what I always remember more than anything about that defense is how much pressure they were able to get from the outside, and they just don't have that yet. So, but they're not going to get it necessarily. They don't have to. Maybe early. Let me ask you a question:
Yeah.
third round, fourth round area, and you're looking for some diamonds in the rough edge rushers. Who are you looking at?
Derek Hall from Auburn, I think, fits the bill there. Yaya Diaby from Louisville, he sets the edge like a 4-3 defensive end, which they like. They like to kind of have one speed guy, one power guy. Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame is a good fit. If the kid, I don't know if he's going to fall. I personally have a second-round grade on Tui Pelutu from USC, but his size profile, if you look at where guys in his profile get drafted with length and speed concerns, he could be a third-round pick. And I think he fits that situation like a glove. So I think one of those three guys would be good. Or one of those four guys, would be good picks there.
Let's talk Cincinnati Bengals football. And can you believe that this 2-year run for the Cincinnati Bengals, including a Super Bowl loss, is the best 2-year run in team history?
Wow.
Crazy.
In terms of wins?
I know it's only 2 years, but it just shows you how things have just turned. And it, of course, starts a quarterback, which is the NFL.
It's always very good.
Gotta have it.
That's the NFL.
Gotta. And so let's talk about offensively, because we don't have to talk about Joe Burrow, that's for sure. But we have to start with Joe Mixon, because what appeared to be that's going to get taken care of. I don't even know if I wrote about it in the Arled's guide, because it just seemed like an old kind of story. It's now a new story again. This is now becoming a little interesting that Joe Mixon might be dealing with some legal issues.
Yep. Yeah, he was recharged for aggravated menacing road rage. I don't know what the actual misdemeanor. Yeah, sorry. I want to get the actual. I'm not a legal guy, so I don't want to get the terminology wrong. Aggravated menacing, a misdemeanor of the first degree. So we're not looking at jail time, but you are looking at a potential penalty. And they lost. Samaje Perine, I don't know if everyone fully appreciates what he did for that offense last year. He was their number one guy in yards per carry last year. He also caught 42 passes. And every time they needed like a big play, a big first down, a goal line touchdown, he was the guy. You know, it's almost like Mixon had more yards, got more touches, but I thought Perine was more important to that offense last year, especially down the stretch. And he's gone, you know. So that depth chart behind Mixon is missing a piece, and now you're saying you might be missing Mixon, or at least get him getting penalized. That and tight end, it's hard to figure out which is a bigger need on this offense.
Well, apparently because this happened recently, is that they've signed Irv Smith Jr.
Right.
So that will hopefully take care of the tight end position. Maybe.
You know,
it doesn't mean that they can't draft another guy, because as we've talked about, there's such a deep class of tight ends. Why would you not want to grab another tight end?
Yeah, I mean, I think this offense. This is the thing. You know, they've been rotating tight ends since Zach Taylor's been there. It might just be a philosophy thing.
Yes.
Right? They might just view it as like, hey, give us the body that's good enough and we'll make it work. And if that's the case, they won't go tight end in round one. But, you know, if you do value the tight end and you do think you can get a Travis Kelce type value out of a Luke Musgrave, or provide your shaky offensive line with a Darnell Washington type, that it makes a lot of sense on paper to let one of those guys be the every downer, and then let Irv Smith be your rotational guy, which is what he's been his entire career anyway.
And by the way, in our second mock draft, we did have Washington, Darnell Washington, going to the Bengals.
It makes sense. It does make sense.
So that's because hey, let's take a look at this history. 2020, and I'm talking about who their number one tight ends were. 2020, it was Sample, who they were hoping was going to be their long-term answer. 2021, it was Azuma. Last year, it was Hurst. So
1 year guy.
yeah,
1 year rental.
that's it.
Yep.
They're just and it also maybe answers your question as far as do they really value it that much? It's just all right. Now
Right.
Irv Smith will be our guy this year. Then we'll move on. So that's something to consider.
It
is that
is.
they may just be content with Irv Smith being the guy this year.
It's a 1 year deal too. Irv Smith's contract is 1 year for 1.7 mil, so it's nothing.
Yep.
It's side money almost. So if it's a philosophy thing, they won't go tight end. But maybe they made that signing saying, "Hey, we see our guy in this draft, and we're going to get him." We'll see.
But no question, the running back position. Because the other thing you have to consider, even though Mixon, the other thing is to be involved with this personal stuff. That has to be a warning sign, because what you can't do is neglect it, and then you're into the regular season. Something else happens to Joe Mixon, and you're going to go, well, hey, dude, you were warned. It's your own fault. So I don't think that they're just going to go after we'll go after another kind of part-time running back. I look at them actually going after somebody that could be effective and maybe even be their new number one running back.
Absolutely. I mean, Mixon, this has been his rap since his days at Oklahoma. He's never been a clean player off the field. There's always been a problem with him. At some point, you hit that third strike and you're out. And there's nothing on this team that screams number one back, and there's a lot of them in this class. So
who give me some options, because they pretty much draft at the end of every round. So give me some options, starting with late first round.
Late first round, I like Jahmyr Gibbs' fit in this offense. You'd have to really be relying on Chris Evans to be the power back, because Jahmyr Gibbs will not be that. He's more of a speed back receiver. Work. Yeah, so I think you'll have to complement him with. I mean, you can get these guys. You might see Ezekiel Elliott coming to town if they really have to get rid of Joe Mixon and let one of these kids complement.
Hasn't he been talking about the Bengals as a possibility? Yeah.
Yep. You look at day 2, you're looking at Zach Charbonnet. I think that'd be a great fit for him. UCLA, Tank Bigsby from Auburn, Kendre Miller from TCU, Eric Gray from Oklahoma. All of those guys are, in my opinion, year one contributors, and you can get all of them on day 2.
Yeah, Elliott, I think he might be in one of those holding patterns like this. Let me see where I think I could go. That
wait for an opportunity to arise.
Yeah.
And skip training camp.
Yeah. I heard the Jets were one of his options, and I was like, I mean, okay.
Yeah. You might have made that up.
Yeah, I don't think so, because the Jets are not going to pay you when they can just go to a rookie undrafted free agent as a number 2 guy this year. So it doesn't make much sense. All right. Moving on offensively, that offensive line in our first mock draft, we had a center. We had the number 1 center going to Cincinnati, and that's still, I think, a possibility. But Karras has been a nice stopgap for them. They like him enough. So, they might be okay there. The Orlando Brown signing was huge. It also gives them the opportunity because, look, Jonah Williams, he's also talking about wanting to move on. And if Jonah Williams leaves, well, Collins probably just slides in. And you have Jackson Carman, who probably deserves a chance to start, because I think he's earned those potential opportunities. So I think on the outside, I don't really look at that as a major issue. Volson came in last year, Kappa obviously. So I think if they just added a center at some point, doesn't have to start right away. If you want to go with Karras, fine, but maybe bring in a center that could start for you, maybe no later than 24.
Yeah, I like it. I like waiting till day 3 for the offensive line in general for this team. They've done a good job. This was the kryptonite of this team for 2 years in a row, and they've done a really nice job, especially with pro personnel acquisitions. Jonah Williams, I do think he's going to be playing elsewhere. It's just hard to get rid of decent offensive line talent. He's nothing special, but everyone's looking for more offensive linemen, and the second an injury or two pop up, you're going to wish you had him. So I think they're only going to ship him out of town if the offer is truly fair.
Yeah, and I would think teams, because like you said, they want not only young offensive linemen, but versatile young offensive linemen. And even though he hasn't lived up to his status, who knows? Maybe a switch.
He can play.
Yeah, it could happen.
He can play.
I think they'll get a good offer. It's just a matter of which team. And they also could use, without question, they need a 4th wideout. They have to bring in that guy. So, because we saw what happened this year when there were some injuries and some of the top guys missed a game here, a game there, they were playing Trenton Irvin and Trent Taylor. That they can't do that and expect to have much success in the long term. It's okay, a game here, a game there, but if one of those guys goes down, as much as they use 3 wide receiver combos, they must add another receiver.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see, what is the T. Higgins situation going to be? I mean, this guy might not be there that much longer. I don't know if they're going to be able to afford him because they have 2 big paydays coming up.
Yeah,
with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
So
you can't keep them all. You can't.
Right, you can't. It's a good problem to have. So getting a receiver in for a potential injury situation this year is part of it, but I think it would just be as equally important for next year and beyond, the year after that.
On defense, you take a look at maybe what their biggest need would be, and I look at the edge because when you look at the pass rushing right now, it's Trey Hendrickson, and that's it. Sam Hubbard is even though he'll throw a few sacks in every year, that's not his specialty. He's not a big edge rush guy. And Osai could be one day, but you still don't know what you got there. So I think on defense, I would go edge rush. Could very well be their number one need.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a tie between that and safety, but they did make safety moves in free agency that filled the holes that they lost in Von Bell and Jesse Bates. They used a first rounder last year on Dax Hill. So, yeah, you point to the edge first. And Osai's the wild card. He missed his rookie season with an injury. And last year, he was a non-factor until down the stretch. And 20 of his 32 pressures on the year came in the last 6 games. So, and then, he had that terrible penalty late in the year that, that's how he's being remembered right now. But I think prior to that, you take that penalty out, his name started to pop up often down the stretch in the playoffs. So, it hurt, or it would not hurt to bring in another edge presence in case he's not the guy, right? He's on a bad wheel already. We haven't seen a season of production yet. And like you said, Hubbard's a run defending DN that complements Hendrickson very well, but can never have enough pass rushers. And right now there's a couple question marks behind the top guy.
Look, they're going to also – Nick Scott, you might look at that and go, well, that can't be the long-term answer, right? But you know what? That's what the Bengals feel. Bengals like him. You think he's going to be a good fit with Dax Hill. They drafted Anderson last year. You talked about some of those additions. So, yeah, I think the safety positions are fine as far as they're concerned. I think the corner positions are fine, but just like the wide receiver positions, if there's an injury to any of those guys, then there's a big drop-off. So depth, at some point, don't have to be early, but I wouldn't be surprised maybe even in the 3rd or 4th round if they added another corner. And we talked about this last year or on the channel about Cam Taylor-Britt. Really, really like Cam Taylor-Britt. I was a little bit surprised he got drafted in the 2nd round, to be honest with you. But his combination as far as size and everything, I was like, you know what? This guy has a shot, and they like him too. And he could turn out to be their number one corner in the future.
Absolutely. I think it might be by the end of 2023, he might surpass Awuzie from the free agent signing from last year. So, I think that he's going to be a very good player. They're set at corner before injuries. But that depth chart, Sidney Jones, they just brought in. I like that as a depth piece. But other than him, I think both safety and corner need depth.
And I think they have, I might be wrong, but I think they might have the best pair of young kickers in the league. Not too many people know Drew Chrisman, but he had such a great college career, and you just knew it was a matter of time before he got the job. And we all know what McPherson can do, so they're set in my mind. It's a great. I was really upset that the Jets didn't go after Chrisman, and I was shocked that no one did. I mean, how could you not? 7th round even, you couldn't get, you allow Drew Chrisman to stay like local and, pick his team. So, hey, I think they got a great combo there.
Yeah, I think they're set there for a long time.
The Cleveland Browns. All right. It was a really difficult year, but we all knew it was going to be a difficult year, starting, of course, with the suspension and all of that, then throw in injuries. It just was not a good year. And when you take a look at it, I think it's like, wait a second. In one respect, we were this close to turning things around back in, what was it, 2020.
Mhm.
That is still now the only winning season in the last 15 years. It looked
Unbelievable.
like they were making a move and Baker Mayfield was going to be the guy. Then he gets hurt. And all of a sudden, then you had the COVID and everything just kind of and then last year was a disaster because Baker, as we know, was gone. So they make the move for Watson. It was a wasted season. But now, see, I think people are forgetting that how deep this roster is. This is still a good roster. They just had injuries and a major issue at quarterback last year, and I think they're going to have an opportunity to turn things around. So when I look at what they really have to do in the draft to be a better team, defensively, I'm gonna stay up front. They need another compliment to Myles Garrett because it's just Myles Garrett, Myles Garrett, Myles Garrett. You got to get somebody else. It can't just be Myles Garrett. And Okoronkwo was a nice pickup, but I don't think that's enough. And they could also use, without question, some answers in the middle. But I don't know if they feel. I love the move to get Tomlinson, but I don't. But I think what it's going to depend on is Perion Winfrey, because everybody loved what happened to Winfrey last year and late in the in the All-Star games and all that stuff. He was wow. Oh, this guy looks like he could be special. Didn't have a good rookie season, but if he could be the guy and make a big step this year, they're set with Tomlinson and Winfrey. But if he's not, then that's why I say that they might want to think about that. Maybe not in the draft. Maybe you just go with it one more season. But I would say the number one need, if we're talking about them on defense up front, would be adding another pass rusher to Myles Garrett in that defense.
Yeah, and because of all the reasons you just said, the players you just talked about, they really can go into the draft saying, let's just get someone with their hand in the dirt. It could be an end, it could be a tackle. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into one of those spots because Myles Garrett, it's just a top heavy group, and God forbid he ever gets hurt. I mean, then you have absolutely nothing on that team that's going to make a difference. And I think that you just got to keep pumping resources into that line and hope that you hit on one of them. I don't think we've seen the best of Winfrey yet. Tristan Hill has flashed over the course of his career. He's a journeyman now. So he's, he doesn't even have a secure spot on this team in terms of making the final roster, but he has flashed in the past. So hopefully they get an answer. But I think no matter what, you just got to add at least one piece to that defensive line unit, inside or outside.
And let's keep in mind, no pick until the third. They don't have a first-round pick next year. So they're going to have to do some but at least the roster has already been put together for the most part.
Yeah.
Which is the reason they made the move, because they felt they could do that, so they just go, all right, we're going to make the move for Watson and hope everything else kind of falls into place. No, this group has done a really good job putting together a pretty nice roster. Also on defense, I think the secondary is in pretty good shape. I don't think that's something to worry about much. They added Thornhill, so that was nice. You really like what they did the last couple of drafts, adding Emerson Jr. and Newsome. But offensively, the running back position, how much do they believe in Jerome Ford as a true number 2 to Nick Chubb? I don't know. I mean, maybe they do. It's not like they do anything much past for, number 2. So what do you think? Do you think they're going to look for a number 2 and keep Ford as a co-2, 3, or do you think they're just going to go in with Chubb and Ford?
No, I think they're going to add a piece to the backfield. I mean, Ford got 8 carries last year, right? John Kelly's had 5 carries since the start of 2019. A lot of this is just simply unknown. And this is a team that is still going to be reliant on the running game, as long as Nick Chubb is there. And you got to have plan B because this team is ready to win now. That's what they're going for right now. And if you can't be overly reliant on one guy, if Chubb does go down, you need someone to be able to step in. And like I've already said, this running back group has plenty of guys that can come in and be an every down back. So I think running back is definitely on the list. I think the offensive line is what worries me the most.
Really? The offensive line. And this is supposed to be a strength.
And it's one spot. It's left tackle.
I was going to say that. It's like, wait a second. But he's the sexy guy. He's the first-round draft pick. How could he be the problem?
Not only is he the first-round draft pick, he's the first-round draft pick that played well as a rookie. And I think sometimes a lot of fans that don't pay attention to the team closely just remember that. But that's 3 years ago, right? And we're talking about a guy that allowed 41 pressures last year, and he was bottom 5 in the NFL in pressure rate, meaning the amount of pressures per pass rush protection snaps. And I don't like the depth either. I don't like the guys that are behind them if injuries start to pop up a little bit.
Yeah, true.
So tackle is a sneaky group because his contract is not up. I think they still have another year or two on him. But there are going to be vacancies on that offensive line within the next year or two. And if you want to move Wills around or you want to make him compete for a spot or you want to get a guy that you're going to groom for a year and then make that decision at this time next offseason because, hey, we're talking round 3. You're not going to draft a starting left tackle in the 3rd round, but you can draft someone that can compete for a spot next year.
All right. Meanwhile, they made the moves, really smart move to trade for Elijah Moore because look, the Jets painted a good picture after he came out to the media and was unhappy while they were winning. And you could just tell, you just kind of knew in the back of your mind, knowing how they like to build culture there, that Joe Douglas was just painting a happy face. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait, they traded him now? I thought everything was okay. Yeah, well, we're not going back into the regular season with that potential problem again. So they wound up trading him, but it was important because it got the extra 2nd-round pick that's going to help them to trade Aaron Rodgers for Rodgers. And for Cleveland, they got a guy with a lot of talent that could now be one of the premier weapons for Deshaun Watson. So that was nice. Now you have not only does that work, but you sign Marquise Goodwin. He still has some speed in him, and you hope David Bell continues to develop. So now your wide receiver group, which didn't look all that good for the past couple of years, is starting to take shape nicely. And I would feel really good about where they are right now at wide receiver.
Yeah, they're you look at who is beyond their first 2 rows of receivers on the Arlad's depth chart. There's going to be guys getting cut after training camp that are going to be on NFL rosters next year. You watch. I mean, Jakeem Grant probably brings that special teams value, but
I don't think. Jakeem Grant ain't going anywhere. I doubt it. He'll have to be. I mean, that's the thing, though. It is very rare that you keep 7 receivers. And Grant being more of only a special teams guy, but injuries occur, so you never know.
Michael Woods, a lot of people liked him coming out last year, didn't really see the field. Jalen Darden basically lost his job because he fumbled a little bit as a returner in Tampa Bay. Marquez Stevenson is a guy that a lot of people liked. Demetric Felton is a guy that Cleveland likes. I mean, they're going to be losing guys that they don't want to lose after training camp.
Do you think that if Schwartz doesn't have a good camp, he's the odd man out, and then that's what keeps Grant there?
That was the name I was looking at. If Grant has to stay and they don't want to keep 7, I think Schwartz is the guy to go.
All right, so keep that in mind. But yeah, I think we're in agreement about Willis. And look, if you can't become a good offensive lineman under Callahan as your teacher, it's just,
see you later.
Yeah, other teams that would be interested in picking you up, they're going to be thinking about that.
Yes, they are.
Callahan couldn't get this guy to. I don't know if I can. All right.
Yeah.
So moving on. Next up, let's now talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's actually going to be the last team that we talk about here today with the AFC North. And the Steelers, there was some movement that I thought was quite interesting this offseason. Especially you take a look at what they did where they added some key pieces to the back 7. They added a couple of key pieces to the interior of the offensive line. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. And if you take a look at that offensive line, do you believe that, hey, we just signed LaRaven Clark and we have Dan Moore and Okafor, we're set? They can't think that, right?
No, this is the thing. I think one of the positives from last year, but long-term negatives is both tackles played pretty well down the stretch. And if this team is a believer in those two guys, they're now going to walk into the offseason and say, hey, told you we have our guys. Go watch the last 5 games. They were good. They were good down the stretch last year. But, if you go break down all the tape from the past 2 years, you can't be confident that they're the answer at left and right tackle. My best case scenario for this team is that they use an early pick on a tackle and let Moore and Okorafor battle it out at the right tackle job. Okay. Or if you don't want to hand a starting job to a rookie, you still bring them in and let the 3 of them compete for 2 spots. I think that's the move.
I think that's the way to go. Now, whether or not the Steelers, like you said, whether or not they believe or they've been like, hey, you know what, we're in good shape now, because it's not just you got egos, obviously, and they want to believe that everything looks better than maybe it is. They do have 2 second-round draft picks. They have the pick from the Bears, which actually I believe is now considered the first pick of the second round at 32, because there's only 31 in the draft this year. So so they're in good shape there with 2 kind of early picks. They don't have to worry about, I was saying, the guard position. I like what they did there. They take Samalo from Philadelphia, and even by adding Herbig from the Jets, what it does is adds more depth. So now with Mason Cole, with Samalo, with Daniels, with Herbig, with Dotson, you're fine. You're okay there. You don't, but it's that tackle position. So they really only have to add one guy. They have to add one tackle, like you said, to compete, or like you said, to maybe, and even if they fall into the, I think we're set. They at least have to then add another tackle, because they don't have a backup.
Right. At some point, they have to. That's the bare minimum in terms of what they have to do in the draft.
Yeah, they can't believe LaRaven Clark is that guy. Now, wide receiver, a lot's going to depend on Calvin Austin and whether or not, him not being able to play last year, because they really liked him and thought that he was going to have a big year and a nice career. So there's still a lot of hope that he's the guy. But the problem is there's nothing behind the top 3. So we even mentioned this yesterday. I would not be surprised because really, seriously, if anytime you try to put a young quarterback out there, you're always talking about, first and foremost, the offensive line. Then you got to get him good weapons. Well, why not go after a guy that has a rapport with your young quarterback in college? He's going to possibly be there. I really think he'll be there. So they have to be thinking about that.
At 32, you're saying?
At 32, I think he could be there. No, actually, I think he'll definitely be there with the first pick. The second pick at 32, he could be there.
Maybe, and if you're nervous about it, maybe you move up a few spots, right? You're not going to have to make a dramatic trade up, but maybe you trade up from 32 to 27 or something like that. I like it, and this team has made a habit a living off of drafting, day 2 receivers, and they've had a lot of success in that area. And this is an organization, you could even see last year when their general manager search, they like to do everything in-house and keep things in the Pittsburgh Steelers template. They don't want to fire their head coach. They hold on to the quarterbacks too long. And the template that they have that works is day 2 receivers. So whether it's Jordan Addison or another guy, no matter what they do with that first pick, I think that's where they're going to go with that second pick, number 32 overall, is a round 2 wide receiver that just economically fits in with their cap situation and gives Kenny Pickett. I mean, this is the thing that they also do very well. They draft the quarterback in, and the next few drafts, they put pieces around him, and they really do try to make it the best possible environment for that player. And so you're talking offensive line in round 1, in my opinion, and then with that 32nd pick, using it on a wide receiver.
They could also use, I'm not sure how confident they are in Warren as a true number 2. So they could use another weapon no matter what at running back. They also could use a true number 2 at tight end. I'm not sure maybe they believe in Hayward, but that's nothing early. And then also, I think on defense, we turn our attention on the defensive side. They did add Holcomb and Roberts. I think those are nice short term. Roberts short term. Maybe Holcomb could be, a long term kind of guy. But that doesn't change my opinion on what we did on our last mock by
Jack
putting.
Campbell.
Yep.
Yep.
Wouldn't he be a really good fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
He would be. And I don't think the contracts that they gave to Robertson and Holcomb, if you look at them, they're not long-term commitments.
No.
I think they're both 2-year deals, but they can easily be out next year, and they're not economically eating up a big part of the cap. So even if they did lose a starting job because you drafted a first-round rookie, it's not hurting the economics of the situation. They've struggled to fill this inside linebacker spot for a long time, and this is an organization they are pissed that they don't have this figured out yet. And this might be the spot if they ignore offense with that first pick. It's going to be a tie between linebacker corner on my list right here. I have linebacker being a bigger priority. A, just because the template that they've used, and B, Holcomb and Roberts. I don't know if I want both of those guys as my every down players. One of them, okay,
yes,
but one of them as a backup, and then have a stud right there in the middle. And Campbell he's a steal. He already looks like one.
He's got the colors.
Yeah, he's got it down already.
Yeah. So we'll see about that. And they have an obvious need at nickel with Sutton gone. They brought in Patrick Peterson. And even Levi Wallace. I'm not sure what you can do. Wallace is really probably better off as a number 4, to tell you the truth. I think you can live with him there if you got a true number 1. But even Peterson he's not getting any younger. Yeah. So the Neal pickup, though, was a nice pickup. So you're set in some packages. I think it's nice that you can have KZ and Neal and Fitzpatrick out there. But yeah, they have to get another corner. What do you think? More outside or nickel, or just go out and get maybe 2 corners, or get a guy that can play both positions?
If you're looking for 2023 contribution, I think nickel is probably the spot where you want a little bit more competition with Arthur Millette. But the outside, man, you can tell they're nervous, right? They're trading for Keller Weatherspoon a couple years ago. They're traded for William Jackson last year, if you remember that. Didn't work out. They're signing Patrick Peterson. They're signing Levi Wallace. They haven't filled the Joe Hayden role. They keep trying. And I think long-term, outside corner is the way to go, because Witherspoon is on opportunity number 3 here. And if it doesn't work out this year, I think he's out. Peterson is not young, as we said. And Levi Wallace, like you said, you don't want him as your number 1 or number 2. If he's in there for depth, you're in a good spot. So if you're asking for long-term, I think it's going to be more about the outside guys. If they're looking for an immediate contributor, it'll be a nickel.
Yeah, I think it would be a home run for Pittsburgh if they were to I would even move up, and I know they're not that type of team, but I would move up in the second round. And if I could end up with Campbell, and let's say, how about I end up with Campbell, Porter, and Addison?
Campbell, Porter, and Addison.
I feel pretty good about that draft.
Yeah, I would feel very good about that. And then you're just gambling with the offensive line a little bit, but you're going to have to gamble with one of those spots. And I mean, if you're walking, so the question is, if you walk away with those 3, are you happy? You're doing cartwheels.
That's why I think you really would have to. Main thing is you have to trade up that second round pick, but you got to do it. I mean, make a move, because I think you're hitting a home run. You're hitting I guess a triple there if you get all 3 of those guys.
The irony there is too. I got asked last night by the guys out for the Pac-12 network, who does Addison remind you of? And I said it's a Deontay Johnson type receiver. Yeah. You put those 2 guys on the same field. And then you hopefully, you see Pickens, who I do think can be a star. I do think Pickens can be a star if he keeps his head on straight. You're talking something big there.
Yeah. If you can have Pickens and Austin and Addison.
Yep.
Just
gotta make sure that offensive line can block.
That's the thing, though. But you can't put them all. You can't fix everything in one off season.
No, you can't.
And again, if they want to feel like they got the guys, then maybe what they do is they make the moves we just talked about, and then learn their lesson if they have to, and then make sure their priority in 2024 is going after an offensive tackle.
Yep.
So, all right. Anyway, that is going to wrap it up for the AFC North. Of course, the NFC North as well. We are going to wrap up our needs reports on Monday with the AFC and NFC East. Then on Wednesday, we're going to talk offensive final rankings for Dave. Defensive final rankings are going to be on Friday. And then on the 21st, we're going to have our live mock draft show. And that's when we're going to give away several PDF guides for the 2023 NFL Draft from ourlads.com. Check out, we'll have the link in the description area of this video so you can go directly to where you can find out how to pick up a draft guide. And let us know if you have any questions regarding the draft on your team, your favorite team, or anything whatsoever. Let Dave know ask Dave anything that's on your mind, and he will definitely get back to you both on the air and also through the message boards. So Dave, appreciate it. Have a great weekend, and we'll wrap up with the East on Monday.
Can't wait. Thanks, Greg.